The neon lights of Sunset Boulevard cast their electric glow across the sprawling gates of Elsinore Studios, the most powerful film empire in Hollywood. It's December 1988, and the air is thick with the scent of jasmine and ambition. Beyond the towering palm trees and Art Deco facades, the legendary lot stretches like a small city, complete with sound stages that have birthed 1,000 dreams and twice as many broken hearts. Security guard Francisco adjusts his uniform as he walks his midnight rounds past the executive building, a gleaming tower of glass and chrome that pierces the Los Angeles skyline. The building's windows reflect the city lights like a constellation of earthbound stars. Christmas decorations still hang from the studio commissary, their red and gold tinsel catching the wind that sweeps down from the Hollywood hills. "Anything strange tonight, Francisco?" asks his replacement, Bernardo, stepping out from behind a row of vintage Rolls-Royce cars parked outside the executive offices. Francisco shakes his head, but his eyes remain troubled. "Third night running, man. I keep seeing something by the old man's office. Top floor, corner suite. You know, the one where Mr. Elsinore used to work before." He doesn't finish the sentence. Everyone on the lot knows about the legendary studio founder's sudden death 3 months ago. The two guards look up at the penthouse office, its floor-to-ceiling windows dark, except for the glow of city lights beyond. The office still contains the mahogany desk, where Denmark Elsinore built his entertainment empire, surrounded by golden Oscars and framed photographs of movie stars spanning 4 decades of cinema history. "There," Bernardo whispers urgently, pointing toward the office windows. "Do you see it?" A figure moves behind the glass, tall, distinguished, wearing what appears to be a classic 1942 suit. For a moment, the silhouette stands perfectly still, as if surveying the empire below. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the figure dissolves into shadow. "That's him," Francisco breathes. "That's Denmark Elsinore. I'd recognize that profile anywhere, but it's impossible we buried him in October." The next morning, the studio buzzes with its usual controlled chaos. Extras in period costumes hurry between sound stages, while grips maneuver massive camera equipment across the lot's palm-lined streets. The air hums with the electricity of creation, but beneath the surface, tension crackles like a live wire. In the executive boardroom, 40 floors above the lot, Claudius Elsinore addresses the studio's board of directors. He's younger than his deceased brother was, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of commanding presence that fills a room. Behind him, floor-to-ceiling windows offer a panoramic view of Los Angeles, stretching to the Pacific Ocean. "Gentlemen, ladies," Claudius begins, his voice carrying the authority of someone born to power, "we gather today not just to mourn Denmark, but to ensure Elsinore Studios continues its reign as Hollywood's premier entertainment empire." The board members, producers, agents, and executives worth millions lean forward attentively. On the polished conference table lie contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, film projects that could make or break careers. "The tragic loss of my brother Denmark has left a void not only in our hearts but in the very foundation of this studio," Claudius continues, gesturing toward the wall of movie posters, showcasing Elsinore Studios' greatest hits from film noir classics of the 1940 seconds to the blockbuster adventures that define the 1980 seconds. "But as they say in this business, the show must go on." He pauses dramatically, a skill honed from years in the entertainment industry, which brings me to an announcement that I believe will secure our future. Gertrude Elsinore and I were married yesterday in a private ceremony in Malibu. The boardroom erupts in surprised murmurs. Through the conference room's glass doors, assistants in power suits pause their phone conversations, sensing the momentous nature of the announcement. Gertrude Elsinore enters the boardroom with the grace of a woman who once commanded movie screens across America. At 52, she still possesses the luminous beauty that made her a star in the early 1970 seconds, though now she's traded her actress roles for the more powerful position of studio matriarch. Her blonde hair is perfectly coiffed, and she wears a cream-colored Chanel suit that speaks of both elegance and authority. "Thank you all for your understanding during this difficult transition," Gertrude says, her voice still carrying traces of the honeyed tones that once captivated audiences. Denmark would have wanted the studio to remain strong, to continue creating the magic that has defined Elsinore for 40 years. Outside the conference room, The studio lot continues its daily rhythm. On stage 7, a science fiction epic is being filmed, complete with elaborate spaceship sets and actors in metallic costumes. The director shouts "Action!" and suddenly the soundstage becomes an alien world, filled with smoke machines and colored lights that transform the cavernous space into something otherworldly. Meanwhile, in the writers' building, a sleek modernist structure lined with palm trees, teams of screenwriters work frantically on scripts that could become next summer's blockbusters. The walls are covered with concept art and storyboards, visual blueprints for dreams yet to be realized. But not everyone at Elsinore Studios celebrates the new union. In an editing suite deep within the facility, Horatio Martinez reviews footage from Denmark Elsinore's final project, a passion piece about Hollywood's golden age that remains unfinished. Horatio, a young editor with thick-rimmed glasses and the lean build of someone who spends 18-hour days in dark rooms perfecting other people's visions, pauses the film on a close-up of Denmark's face. "The greatest films are about truth," Denmark had said during his final interview, recorded just weeks before his death, about looking past the glamour and finding the human heart beneath all the artifice. Horatio fast-forwards through the footage, searching for something he can't quite name. The images flicker past Denmark, directing actors, reviewing dailies, walking across the lot he built from nothing. There's something in the old man's final weeks, a tension visible in his eyes, a wariness that seems almost prophetic. Across the lot, in the studio's most prestigious soundstage, a different kind of drama unfolds. Hamlet Elsinore, 28 years old, an heir to the entertainment empire, sits in his director's chair, but stares blankly at the elaborate set. Before him, a recreation of 1,950 seconds. New York complete with vintage cars and neon signs. Hamlet should be directing his first major studio picture, a psychological thriller that could establish him as more than just Denmark Elsinore's son. Instead, he sits motionless while his crew waits for direction. The actors in their period costumes shift uncomfortably under the hot stage lights, beads of sweat forming on their carefully applied makeup. "Mr. Elsinore?" ventures the cinematographer, a veteran of dozens of films. "Should we go with the wide shot or start with the close-up?" Hamlet doesn't respond immediately. His dark hair, longer than studio executives typically prefer, falls across his forehead as he stares at the script in his hands. The pages are filled with notes in his father's handwriting, suggestions, encouragements, the guidance of a mentor who will never give advice again. "Cut for lunch," Hamlet finally announces, standing abruptly. "We'll pick this up at 2. The crew exchanges glances but begins the familiar ritual of breaking for lunch. Equipment is secured, lights are adjusted, and the elaborate set, which cost the studio $3 million to construct, falls quiet except for the hum of air conditioning units working overtime against the California heat. Hamlet walks off the soundstage and into the bright December sunlight that bathes the studio lot in golden warmth. Even in winter, Los Angeles feels like a perpetual summer, and the palm trees lining the studio streets sway gently in the Santa Ana winds that sweep down from the mountains. He passes the commissary where studio executives dine on power lunches, their conversations peppered with talk of opening weekends, foreign distribution deals, and the ever-present question of what audiences want. Through the windows, Hamlet glimpses Polonius Karambas, the studio's head of production, gesticulating wildly as he explains something to a table of young executives. Polonius has worked at Elsinore Studios for 20 years, rising from script reader to one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. His daughter Ophelia works in the story development department, and his son Laertes just graduated from film school at USC, eager to follow in the family business. The executive building looms before Hamlet, like a glass and steel monument to his father's vision. In the lobby, a massive portrait of Denmark Elsinore dominates the space, the studio founder in his prime, eyes bright with the confidence of a man who believed he could capture dreams and sell them to the world. Hamlet takes the express elevator to the 40th floor, where his father's office remains unchanged. Claudius has moved into a larger suite down the hall, leaving Denmark's workspace as a kind of shrine. The mahogany desk still holds the same fountain pen Denmark used to sign contracts, and the walls display 4 decades of movie posters, epic adventures, intimate dramas, and the occasional artistic risk that defined the studio's reputation. But as Hamlet settles into his father's chair, something feels wrong. The office, once a place of creative energy and paternal guidance, now feels hollow. The afternoon sun streams through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the Persian rugs and leather furniture. But the warmth feels artificial, like stage lighting. Outside, the lot continues its daily production of illusions. Extras in elaborate costumes hurry between sound stages, special effects, teams test explosions that will later become movie magic, and in the editing suites, teams of technicians piece together the fragments of stories that will soon captivate millions of viewers worldwide. Yet Hamlet remains frozen in his father's chair, staring out at an empire built on dreams but now shrouded in the shadows of loss, betrayal, and questions that seem to have no answers. 3 weeks after the wedding announcement, the Elsinore Studios lot buzzes with renewed energy. The January morning sun casts sharp shadows between the sound stages, where crews prepare for another day of movie magic. Stage 12 houses the elaborate medieval set for the studio's upcoming summer blockbuster, complete with towering castle walls and a moat filled with carefully treated water that sparkles under the tungsten lights. In the executive parking garage, beneath the glass towers where Hollywood's elite make decisions worth millions, Polonius Corambus loads a leather suitcase into the trunk of his silver Mercedes-Benz. The garage's concrete walls echo with the sound of expensive car doors closing as studio executives arrive for another day of deal-making and dream-weaving. "Remember, Laertes," Polonius says to his son, who stands beside a loaded Porsche 911, its red paint gleaming under the garage's fluorescent lights. "Film school taught you the technical aspects, but real success in this business comes from understanding people. Watch who you associate with, especially in those USC alumni parties." Laertes Corambis, 24 and eager to prove himself in the family business, adjusts his Ray-Ban sunglasses and grins with the confidence of youth and privilege. His hair is perfectly styled in the fashionable mullet of the late 1982, and he wears a linen suit that speaks of expensive taste and unlimited studio connections. "I've got meetings with 3 production companies this week, Dad. Plus that party at Steven Spielberg's house in the hills. This town is about connections, and I plan to make all the right ones. Just remember," Polonius continues, placing a paternal hand on his son's shoulder, "loan neither money nor scripts. For loan oft loses both itself and friend." And most importantly, he pauses dramatically, a habit developed from years of pitching movie ideas. "This above all, to thine own creative vision be true, and it must follow, as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man or studio executive." Laertes laughs and slides into his Porsche, the engine purring to life with Germanic precision. "See you at the Golden Globes, Dad. Try not to let Uncle Claudius drive you too crazy while I'm gone." The sports car disappears up the ramp toward Sunset Boulevard, leaving Polonius alone with his thoughts and the distant sound of construction crews building tomorrow's movie sets. Meanwhile, 40 floors above in the executive suites, Claudius Elsinore studies a wall-mounted chart displaying the studio's upcoming releases. Each film is represented by colorful graphs showing projected box office returns, international distribution deals, and marketing budgets that rival the gross national products of small nations. "The numbers look promising for spring," says Rosenkrantz, one of Elsinore Studios' newest executives, a sharp young man in an Armani suit who graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School. "But we're concerned about Hamlet's project. Production has been irregular." His companion, Guildenstern, nods in agreement while flipping through a leather portfolio filled with production reports. "The crew morale is suffering, and we're 3 days behind schedule. At this rate, we'll miss our summer release date." Claudius turns from the chart, his expression thoughtful. Both men have been friends of Hamlet since their college days at UCLA, where they studied film together in the heady days of the early 1980s, when personal computers were still novelties and MTV was revolutionizing how young people consumed culture. "I need you both to spend time with him," Claudius says, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offer a commanding view of the studio lot below. "Find out what's troubling him. Denmark's death hit us all hard. But Hamlet seems different, distracted, almost unstable." Through the window, they can see Stage 7, where Hamlet's troubled production continues. Even from this height, the chaos is visible. Crew members standing idle, expensive equipment gathering dust, and the elaborate sets that cost millions sitting unused while their director struggles with demons only he can see. Down on stage 7, the elaborate New York street set stands frozen in artificial twilight. The neon signs advertising fictional businesses Tony's Diner, Palace Theater, Murphy's Bar cast their colored glow across wet asphalt that maintenance crews spray down hourly to axes. Maintain the illusion of a city after rain. Steam rises from carefully concealed machines, creating the atmospheric haze that cinematographers love but actors endure. Hamlet sits alone in his director's chair, staring at a script that has become more question than story. The pages are dog-eared and filled with his increasingly erratic notes, written in different colored inks that map his emotional journey through grief, confusion, and growing suspicion. Ham calls a familiar voice across the soundstage. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern approach with the easy confidence of men who have never known failure, their expensive suits perfectly pressed despite the California heat that builds even inside the air-conditioned soundstages. Guys, Hamlet responds without enthusiasm, not looking up from his script. Let me guess, Uncle Claudius sent you to check on the crazy nephew. Come on, man, Guildenstern says, settling onto a prop crate beside the director's chair. We're worried about you. You haven't been yourself since Denmark died. We get it, losing a father is brutal, especially when he was your mentor too. Rosencrantz nods sympathetically while examining the elaborate set around them. The attention to detail is extraordinary. Period-appropriate cars, vintage street lamps, even historically accurate trash scattered in the gutters. Every element has been researched, constructed, and placed with the precision that separates major studio productions from independent films. Remember USC? Rosencrantz continues. Remember how excited you used to get about filmmaking? You'd stay up all night in the editing lab, splicing footage by hand before digital became the standard. You said movies could change the world. That was before I learned how the world really works. Hamlet replies, finally looking at his old friends. Before I understood that every dream comes with a price tag, and every story serves someone's agenda. The three men sit in silence for a moment, surrounded by the controlled chaos of a film set in limbo. Crew members move quietly around the periphery, adjusting lights and checking equipment, but they maintain a respectful distance from their troubled director. There's something else, Hamlet says suddenly, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Something about Dad's death. The official story doesn't add up. Before his friends can respond, a studio page approaches nervously. She's young, probably fresh out of college, with the eager expression of someone still dazzled by Hollywood's glamour. Mr. Elsinore, there's someone here to see you. A woman named Ophelia Carambis from Story Development. Across the soundstage, Ophelia emerges from the shadows between the elaborate set pieces. She's 26, with auburn hair that catches the artificial streetlights, and she moves with the quiet confidence of someone who has learned to navigate the shark-infested waters of studio politics. Her vintage-inspired dress and leather portfolio mark her as both creative and professional, a combination that's essential for survival in 1980 seconds Hollywood. Hamlet, she says softly, her voice carrying just enough warmth to cut through his melancholy. I brought the rewrites you requested, though honestly, I'm not sure the script is the problem. Ophelia has known Hamlet for 3 years, since she started working at Elsinore Studios fresh from her master's degree in literature at Stanford. She's watched him evolve from an eager young filmmaker to the brooding figure he's become since his father's death. Maybe not, Hamlet admits, accepting the script pages but not really looking at them. Maybe the problem is bigger than any story we could tell. The afternoon light streaming through the soundstage's high windows begins to fade, and the artificial lighting of the New York street set grows more prominent. The neon signs flicker with electric life, casting rainbow shadows across the wet pavement, and creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere that blurs the line between reality and illusion. Walk with me, Hamlet says to Ophelia, suddenly standing with renewed energy. They leave Rosencrantz and Guildenstern on the soundstage, walking out into the studio lot where the late afternoon sun casts long shadows between the buildings. The lot feels different in the golden hour, less like a place of business, and more like a small city with its own mysterious rhythms. Golf carts carrying executives in expensive suits cruise past soundstages where tomorrow's blockbusters take shape. In the distance, the Hollywood sign perches on the hills like a beacon, reminding everyone of the dreams that built this industry. You know what's strange? Hamlet says as they walk past the studio commissary, where through the windows they can see producers making deals over expensive lunches. Nobody talks about how Dad really died. Heart attack, they say. Stress of the business. But Denmark Elsinore was healthier than men half his age. Ophelia glances around nervously, aware that in Hollywood, walls have ears and careers can be destroyed by the wrong conversation overheard by the right person. Hamlet, maybe some things are better left. He was working on something, Hamlet interrupts, his voice gaining intensity. A project he kept secret, even from me. Something that made him paranoid in those final weeks. He changed the locks on his office 3 times, started carrying a briefcase that never left his side. They pause beside the studio's legendary backlot, where entire city blocks and western towns stand ready to be transformed into any location a story might require. The sets look almost ghostly in the fading light. A Victorian London street beside a Wild West saloon, a space station corridor adjacent to a 1,952nd suburban neighborhood. The night before he died, Hamlet continues, his words coming faster now. I saw him leaving the studio at 2 a.m. He looked scared, Ophelia. Denmark Elsinore, who built this empire from nothing, looked genuinely frightened. A security golf cart approaches, its headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. The guard waves politely. Everyone on the lot recognizes Hamlet Elsinore, even if his recent behavior has become the subject of whispered conversations in the executive dining room. As they reach the executive building, its 40 floors of glass and steel rising toward the first stars appearing in the darkening sky, Hamlet stops suddenly. His attention is fixed on the top floor, where his father's office windows glow with an eerie light. That's impossible, he whispers. What? Ophelia follows his gaze upward. The light's in Dad's office. Nobody has the keys except security, and they never go up there after sunset. As they watch, a figure appears in the window, tall, distinguished, wearing what appears to be a classic suit. The silhouette stands motionless for a long moment, as if surveying the empire below, before stepping back into shadow. Did you see? Hamlet begins. I saw... Ophelia breathes, her voice tight with fear and wonder. The executive building's lobby is empty, except for the security desk, where a lone guard reads a newspaper beneath a dramatic portrait of Denmark Elsinore. The marble floors reflect the crystal chandeliers that cast prismatic light across the walls, lined with movie posters from 4 decades of entertainment history. Mr. Elsinore? The guard looks up, surprised. Working late tonight? Something like that, Hamlet replies, his eyes fixed on the bank of elevators. Has anyone been up to the 40th floor today? No, sir, not since the cleaning crew this morning. Your uncle specifically requested that floor remain undisturbed. Hamlet and Ophelia exchange glances as they enter the elevator. The ride to the top floor feels endless, the numbers lighting up one by one as they rise above the sprawling studio lot, above the city lights beginning to twinkle across Los Angeles, toward whatever waits in the darkness of Denmark Elsinore's preserved office. The elevator doors open with a soft chime, revealing the executive hallway lined with mahogany doors and Persian rugs. At the end of the corridor, Denmark's office door stands slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway like an invitation or a warning. The 40th floor of Elsinore Studios feels different at night, oppressive, charged with an energy that has nothing to do with the building's electrical systems. The hallway stretches before Hamlet and Ophelia like a scene from one of the studio's psychological thrillers, all shadows and amber light from the vintage sconces that Denmark had insisted on installing when the building was constructed. Maybe we should call security, Ophelia whispers. But Hamlet is already moving toward his father's office, drawn by a compulsion he can't name or resist. The office door swings open at his touch, revealing the familiar space where Denmark Elsinore built his entertainment empire. The massive mahogany desk dominates the room, its surface still arranged exactly as it was the day Denmark died. Fountain pen placed precisely beside the leather blotter, a half-empty bottle of Macallan whiskey, and a framed photograph of Hamlet at his USC graduation. But something is wrong with the light. The usual warm glow from the desk lamp has been replaced by an ethereal luminescence that seems to emanate from everywhere and nowhere, casting no shadows despite its brightness. The temperature in the room has dropped noticeably, and both Hamlet and Ophelia can see their breath in the suddenly frigid air. "Son." The voice comes from behind the desk, and as Hamlet's eyes adjust, he sees him Denmark Elsinore, looking exactly as he did in life but somehow more vivid, more present than any living person in the room. He wears his favorite charcoal suit, the one he always chose for important board meetings, and his silver hair is perfectly styled in the way that made him instantly recognizable throughout Hollywood. "Dad?" Hamlet's voice breaks like a teenager's. 3 months of grief and confusion crystallizing into this impossible moment. "I have little time," Denmark says, his voice carrying that familiar authority, but with an urgency Hamlet has never heard before. "Listen carefully to what I tell you, and remember every word." Ophelia grips Hamlet's arm, her nails digging into his jacket sleeve. She can see Denmark too, this impossible figure who should be resting in his mausoleum at Forest Lawn Cemetery, where Hollywood's legends spend eternity among perfectly manicured gardens and marble monuments. "My death was not natural, Hamlet. I was murdered poisoned while I slept in my private screening room after reviewing dailies for the summer slate." The screening room, Denmark's sanctuary within the office suite, where he would review rough cuts and make the final decisions that could transform unknown actors into superstars or bury expensive projects forever. The room contained a single reclining leather chair positioned perfectly before a state-of-the-art projection system, a place where Denmark could experience movies the way he believed they should be seen in absolute solitude and silence. "Claudius crept in while I dozed after midnight screenings." Denmark continues, his form seeming to flicker like old film stock. "He poured poison in my ear, a toxin that mimics heart failure, leaves no trace that standard autopsies can detect. Your uncle wanted my studio, my wife, and my legacy. He took all three in a single calculated act." The revelation hits Hamlet like a physical blow. Everything he suspected, every nagging doubt about the official story, crystallizes into horrible certainty. The man he grew up calling Uncle Claudius, who taught him to drive and attended his film school graduation, had committed the ultimate betrayal. But why? Hamlet whispers, though part of him already knows the answer. "Power," Denmark Spirit replies. "Elsinore Studios is worth $800 million. We're negotiating international distribution deals that will double that within 5 years. Claudius grew tired of being the younger brother, tired of living in my shadow while I built this empire." Outside the office windows, Los Angeles spreads out like a circuit board, millions of lights creating patterns that stretch from the Pacific Ocean to the San Gabriel Mountains. The city never sleeps, and even at this late hour, the pulse of ambition and creativity beats through its streets like a living heartbeat. "Your mother knew nothing of the murder. But Claudius seduced her within weeks of my death. He needed her support to legitimize his claim to the studio. The board of directors would never have accepted him without Gertrude's endorsement." The temperature in the room continues to drop, and frost begins forming on the windows that offer their panoramic view of the entertainment capital of the world. "You must avenge my murder, Hamlet." Denmark's ghostly figure continues, his form growing more translucent as the minutes pass. "But spare your mother. Leave her to heaven and to those thorns that in her bosom lodge, to prick and sting her conscience." The ghost begins to fade, becoming nothing more than a shimmer in the cold air. "Remember me, son. Remember what I built here, and don't let my legacy die with me." And then he's gone, leaving only the normal office lighting and the sudden return of warmth. The frost on the windows begins to melt immediately, creating rivulets of water that catch the city lights like tears. Hamlet stands frozen for a long moment, staring at the empty space where his father appeared. The weight of the revelation crashes over him like a tsunami. Not only is his father dead, but murdered by the man who now controls everything Denmark built. The man who shares his mother's bed and signs the paychecks of everyone Hamlet has ever known in this business. "Hamlet," Ophelia whispers, her voice shaking, "what are we going to do?" "I don't know," he admits, slumping into his father's chair. "How do you prove a ghost story? How do you accuse one of Hollywood's most powerful men of murder based on a supernatural visitation?" The office feels different now, no longer a shrine to his father's memory, but a crime scene. Every familiar object takes on new significance. The half-empty whiskey bottle, had Claudius used it to drug his brother? The comfortable screening room beyond the office? The scene of the murder itself? "We need evidence," Hamlet says finally. his mind beginning to work through the implications. Real evidence that will convince the police, the board of directors, the world. He pulls open his father's desk drawers, searching through papers and contracts with new purpose. In the bottom drawer, hidden behind a false back, he finds a slim manila folder marked Confidential Project Mousetrap. Inside the folder are photographs, financial records, and a single typewritten page that makes Hamlet's blood run cold. It's a preliminary report from a private investigator detailing Claudius's secret meetings with rival studio executives, discussions about hostile takeovers, and the elimination of obstacles to acquisition. My God. Hamlet breathes, showing the documents to Ophelia. Dad was investigating Claudius before he died. He suspected something. The final document in the folder is a note in Denmark's handwriting. If something happens to me, look for the poison in the screening room ventilation system. C. Has access to military-grade toxins through his contacts at Paramount. Their security chief is former CIA. Armed with this new knowledge, Hamlet's grief transforms into something harder and more dangerous. But he also realizes the precariousness of his position. Claudius now controls the studio, the security forces, and has the power to destroy anyone who threatens him. We can't trust anyone, Hamlet tells Ophelia as they prepare to leave the office. Not Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, they report directly to Claudius now. Not the studio executives, their careers depend on staying in his good graces. We're completely alone. As they ride the elevator down through the tower, past floors filled with editing suites and production offices, where tomorrow's entertainment takes shape, Hamlet formulates a plan. If he can't prove Claudius's guilt through conventional means, he'll have to be more creative. After all, he's a filmmaker. He knows the power of stories to reveal truth, to manipulate emotions, to force people to confront realities they'd rather ignore. In the morning, he'll return to Stage 7 and his troubled production. But now he has a new purpose for the cameras and actors at his disposal. The lobby is empty except for the night security guard, who nods respectfully as they pass. Outside, the studio lot sleeps under the glow of sodium vapor lights. The sound stages standing like massive monuments to the dreams and ambitions that drive this industry. What happens now? Ophelia asks as they walk toward the parking garage. Now, Hamlet replies, his voice carrying a new edge of determination. I'm going to catch a killer, and I'm going to use every trick this business taught me to do it. The next morning arrives with the kind of crystalline clarity that only comes after winter storms in Los Angeles. The studio lot sparkles under brilliant sunshine, palm fronds still dripping from the overnight rain that has washed the smog from the air and left everything looking newly minted. Hamlet arrives at Stage 7 before dawn, his mind racing with possibilities. The elaborate New York street set stands ready, its neon signs dark, but the steam machines already warming up for another day of filming. But today will be different. Today, the cameras will serve a purpose beyond entertainment. Change of plans, he announces to his surprised crew as they arrive with their coffee and morning optimism. We're scrapping the original script. I'm rewriting the entire third act. The cinematographer, a veteran of dozens of films, exchanges worried glances with the script supervisor. Directors don't typically make radical changes this deep into production, not unless they're having a breakdown or experiencing some kind of artistic crisis. What's the new direction? Asks the lead actor, Marcus Ray, a method actor known for his intense preparation and commitment to his roles. Marcus has the kind of chiseled features that photograph beautifully, combined with the acting chops to elevate any material. We're doing a story within the story. Hamlet explains, pacing energetically around the set. Your character discovers that his business partner, the man he trusted most, murdered his father to steal the family company. As he speaks, Hamlet's vision becomes clearer. He'll craft a scene so specific, so detailed, that anyone watching, particularly Claudius, will recognize the truth being portrayed. The power of cinema lies in its ability to make the audience see themselves reflected in the story, and Hamlet intends to hold up a very specific mirror. I want the murder scene to be precise, he continues, his voice growing more intense. The victim is alone, reviewing business documents late at night. The killer enters silently, approaches from behind, and administers poison that mimics natural causes. The crew listens with growing unease. This level of detail, this passionate obsession with a murder scene, feels less like filmmaking and more like confession or accusation. "Sir," ventures the assistant director, a young woman who's worked her way up through the studio system. "Should we clear this with the producers?" "Mr. Claudius specifically asked to review any major script changes." "Perfect." Hamlet grins with an expression that doesn't reach his eyes. "Schedule a screening for tomorrow night. Private screening room, executive level. Tell Uncle Claudius I want to show him my artistic breakthrough." The day proceeds with frenetic energy as Hamlet drives his cast and crew through take after take of the new scenes. He's looking for something beyond mere performance. He needs authenticity that will resonate with absolute truth. Marcus Ray throws himself into the role with method actor intensity, channeling grief and betrayal that seems to come from some deep well of personal experience. By evening, the footage is in the can, and Hamlet retreats to an editing suite in the basement of the executive building. The room is small and windowless, illuminated only by the glow of monitors and the blinking lights of sophisticated equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Here, in the electronic darkness, Hamlet begins crafting his weapon. The editing process becomes almost surgical as he selects each cut, each angle, each close-up with deadly precision. The murder scene plays out in excruciating detail: the victim's trust, the killer's calculated approach, the moment of betrayal. Every element mirrors what his father's ghost revealed about that fatal night in the screening room. "This will either expose a murderer or destroy my career," Hamlet mutters to himself as he fine-tunes the final sequence. "Maybe both." The editing suite's air conditioning hums quietly, the only sound besides the electronic whisper of digital equipment. Through the building's floors above, Hamlet can hear the distant sounds of night cleaning crews working through the offices where Hollywood's power brokers will tomorrow make decisions worth millions. As dawn approaches, Hamlet puts the finishing touches on his creation: 15 minutes of film that could change everything. The story within the story is complete, a cinematic trap baited with truth and designed to catch a killer's guilty conscience. In 12 hours, Claudius Elsinore will sit in a screening room and watch his crime portrayed with devastating accuracy. If he's truly guilty, his reaction will be unmistakable. And if Hamlet is wrong, if his father's ghost was nothing more than grief-induced hallucination, then he'll have destroyed himself for nothing. Either way, the cameras will be rolling. The executive screening room on the 40th floor of Elsinore Studios represents the pinnacle of 1980 seconds home theater technology. The walls are lined with rich burgundy leather, and the 12 reclining chairs are positioned with mathematical precision to provide optimal viewing angles of the massive screen. Behind tinted glass, state-of-the-art projection equipment waits in climate-controlled silence, ready to transform celluloid dreams into reality. Claudius arrives precisely at 8 p.m., dressed in his signature charcoal suit and carrying the gold-plated fountain pen that has signed contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. His silver hair is perfectly styled, and he moves with the confident stride of a man who controls one of Hollywood's most powerful empires. "Hamlet," he says warmly, settling into the center chair with practiced ease. "I'm looking forward to seeing what you've created. Your father always said the third act was where great filmmakers separated themselves from mere technicians." Gertrude enters the screening room wearing an elegant cream-colored dress that complements her still luminous beauty. At 52, she maintains the poise that once made her a star, though now her role has evolved from actress to studio matriarch. She takes the chair beside Claudius, her movements graceful despite the tension that seems to permeate the room. "Darling," she says to Hamlet, "you look tired. Have you been sleeping?" Hamlet doesn't answer immediately. He's positioned himself near the projection booth controls, where he can watch every reaction, every micro-expression that crosses his uncle's face. Behind the tinted glass, Horatio operates the projection equipment, the only person Hamlet trusts completely in this den of sharks and power players. "I've been working," Hamlet finally replies, his voice carrying an edge that makes both Claudius and Gertrude shift uncomfortably in their leather chairs. Also present are Polonius, Rosencrantz, and Guildenstern, all seated in the secondary row, their faces illuminated by the soft amber lighting that creates the perfect atmosphere for experiencing cinema. They represent the studio's power structure, the executives and advisors who shape the decisions that influence popular culture worldwide. "Begin the film," Hamlet announces, his voice echoing slightly in the acoustically perfect room. The screen comes alive with the opening credits of Hamlet's psychological thriller, but something is different from the original concept. The title card reads "The Mousetrap" in bold letters that seem to burn into the screen like a brand. The opening scene shows a luxurious corporate office, clearly modeled after Denmark's suite, complete with the same mahogany furniture and panoramic city views. As the story unfolds, Claudius watches with growing unease. The plot follows a successful businessman who suspects his partner of embezzling funds. The protagonist investigates secretly, gathering evidence while maintaining a facade of trust and family loyalty. The parallels to recent events at Elsinore Studios are unmistakable, but still subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability. "Interesting choice of setting," Claudius comments, his voice carefully neutral. "Very familiar." "I believe in writing what you know," Hamlet replies, never taking his eyes off his uncle's face. The film continues, building toward its climactic revelation. The businessman character works late into the night, reviewing financial documents in his private screening room, a detail so specific that Gertrude gasps audibly. On screen, the actor portraying the victim looks remarkably similar to Denmark Elsinore, down to the same silver hair and authoritative bearing. "This is quite realistic," Polonius observes, though his usual confidence seems shaken, almost documentary-like in its attention to detail. The tension in the screening room becomes palpable as the film approaches its murder sequence. Hamlet has crafted the scene with surgical precision, showing the killer's approach from behind, the administration of poison through the ear, and the victim's peaceful death that would be mistaken for natural causes. Claudius's hands grip the arms of his chair, his knuckles white against the burgundy leather. Sweat beads on his forehead despite the room's perfect climate control, and his breathing becomes increasingly shallow and rapid. "Where did you get the inspiration for this particular method?" Gertrude asks, her voice barely above a whisper. "Research," Hamlet answers cryptically. "Amazing what you can learn when you really dig into a subject." The murder scene plays out on the massive screen with devastating clarity. Every detail mirrors the crime described by Denmark's Ghost, the late-night setting, the victim's vulnerability, the killer's calculated approach. The actor portraying the murderer bears an unmistakable resemblance to Claudius, from his silver-streaked hair to his confident stride. As the poison is administered on screen, Claudius suddenly lurches forward in his chair, his face pale and his breathing ragged. The carefully controlled executive facade crumbles, revealing the guilty conscience beneath. "Stop the film," he gasps, his voice cracking like breaking glass. "But we haven't reached the best part yet," Hamlet says coldly, making no move toward the projection controls. The killer's reaction when he realizes someone knows the truth. Claudius staggers to his feet, his expensive suit wrinkled and his usual composure completely shattered. The gold fountain pen falls from his trembling fingers, clattering against the screening room's polished floor like an accusation. "This is sick," he manages, backing toward the door. "This obsession with death and murder, it's not healthy, Hamlet. You need help." "The only one who needs help," Hamlet replies, his voice rising with righteous fury, "is a murderer trying to escape justice." The other executives sit frozen in their leather chairs, watching the confrontation with the horrified fascination of witnesses to a car accident. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern exchange panicked glances, suddenly realizing they've been manipulated as pawns in a much larger and more dangerous game. Claudius flees the screening room, his footsteps echoing through the executive hallway as he rushes toward the elevators. Behind him, the film continues playing to an audience paralyzed by shock and revelation. "My God," Gertrude whispers, her perfectly manicured hand pressed to her throat. "Hamlet, what have you done?" "I've exposed a killer," he responds, his eyes still blazing with the intensity of someone who has finally found his purpose. "The question is what happens next." Within an hour, the studio lot buzzes with whispered conversations and hastily called meetings. Security guards patrol with increased vigilance, their usually casual demeanor replaced by military alertness. In executive offices throughout the tower, phones ring constantly as the news spreads through Hollywood's interconnected web of agents, producers, and power brokers. Claudius has locked himself in his office suite, frantically making calls to lawyers, fixers, and the kind of people who specialize in making problems disappear. Through his floor-to-ceiling windows, Los Angeles spreads out below like a circuit board of ambition and corruption, its millions of lights reflecting his growing desperation. "I need you to handle a situation," he says, into his secure phone line, his voice barely controlled. "Someone is making accusations. False accusations that could destroy everything." Meanwhile, Hamlet retreats to his father's preserved office, where the ghost's revelation now feels more real than ever. The evidence folder labeled Project Mousetrap lies open on the mahogany desk, its contents serving as proof that Denmark suspected his brother's treachery before his death. But Hamlet's triumph feels hollow. Exposing Claudius has only made him more dangerous. A cornered predator is the most lethal kind, and Claudius controls too much power to simply surrender to justice. Ophelia finds him there, staring out at the studio lot where his father built an empire that has now become a battleground. "They're saying you've had a breakdown," she reports quietly. "That grief has made you unstable." Claudius is spinning the story as a tragic case of a young man unable to cope with loss. "Of course he is," Hamlet replies bitterly. "In this town, perception is reality. Control the narrative. Control the truth. What are you going to do?" Hamlet turns from the window, his expression hardening with resolve. "I'm going to finish what my father started. But first, I need to confront the one person who might still choose the right side." The executive elevator carries him down to the 38th floor, where his mother's office overlooks the studio's legendary backlot. Through her windows, the elaborate sets stretch into the distance: Western towns and European villages, space stations and suburban neighborhoods, all the dreams and fantasies that Elsinore Studios transforms into entertainment for the masses. Gertrude's office reflects her dual nature as both former movie star and current studio power broker. The walls display framed photographs from her acting career, red carpet premieres, magazine covers, and behind-the-scenes shots with legendary directors. But her massive glass desk is covered with current production schedules, distribution deals, and financial reports that represent hundreds of millions in projected revenue. "Mother," Hamlet says as he enters without knocking, his voice carrying a coldness that makes Gertrude look up from her paperwork with visible alarm. "Hamlet, darling," she begins, but he cuts her off with a gesture that brooks no interruption. "Don't darling me. Not after what I just witnessed in that screening room." He moves to the windows that offer a panoramic view of the studio backlot, where elaborate sets stand like monuments to manufactured dreams. "Did you know about Claudius and what he did to Dad?" Gertrude rises from her chair, her cream-colored dress rustling with the movement. Even in crisis, she maintains the poise that once captivated audiences worldwide, but her hands tremble slightly as she smooths her still perfect hair. "I don't know what you think you've discovered," she says carefully. "But these accusations you're making." "Accusations?" Hamlet spins to face her, his eyes blazing with fury and betrayal. "I watched him flee that screening room like a guilty man running from justice. His reaction confirmed everything Dad's ghost told me." "Ghost?" Gertrude's voice cracks. "Hamlet, you're talking about seeing your father's ghost. Do you understand how that sounds?" "It sounds like the truth," he replies, stepping closer to her desk. "Tell me, Mother, when did you stop loving him? Was it before he died, or only after Claudius started whispering poison in your ear, along with promises of continued power?" The accusation hits Gertrude like a physical blow. Her carefully maintained composure begins to crumble, revealing the frightened woman beneath the executive facade. "Your father and our marriage had grown complicated. The business consumed him completely. I spent years feeling like a widow long before I actually became one. So that justified jumping into his brother's bed before Dad was even cold in his grave?" Hamlet's voice rises with each word. 3 months, Mother. 3 months between funeral and wedding. Even by Hollywood standards, that's impressively callous. Through the office windows, the afternoon sun casts long shadows across the backlot's artificial streets and buildings. The elaborate sets look almost ghostly in the golden light: a western saloon beside a medieval castle, a space station adjacent to a 1922nd speakeasy. All the dreams and fantasies that built this empire seem to mock the ugly reality playing out in the executive suite above. "You don't understand," Gertrude protests, her voice growing desperate. "Claudius offered stability, security. Without a strong leader, the studio would have been torn apart by vultures. The board was already circling, looking for ways to break up the company and sell the pieces. So you sold yourself instead." Hamlet replies with cold precision. Traded your integrity for stock options and a continued place at the top of the pyramid. The temperature in the room suddenly drops, and both Hamlet and Gertrude can see their breath in the frigid air. The same ethereal light that appeared in Denmark's office begins to fill the space, casting no shadows despite its intensity. She doesn't know, says a familiar voice. Denmark Elsinore materializes behind his widow's desk, his ghostly presence somehow more solid than before. He wears the same charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, but his expression carries infinite sadness rather than the anger Hamlet expected. Dad? Hamlet breathes. Gertrude spins around, following her son's gaze, but she sees only empty air. Hamlet, there's nothing there. You're talking to empty space. She cannot see or hear me, Denmark explains, his voice carrying across dimensions of existence that separate the living from the dead. Guilt blinds her to truth, just as love once blinded me to her weaknesses. Tell her about the poison, Hamlet demands. Tell her how Claudius murdered you in the screening room while she was probably already planning her next marriage. She knows nothing of the murder, the ghost replies. Claudius seduced her with promises and lies, playing on her fears of losing everything we built. She's a victim too, in her way. The revelation stops Hamlet's rage cold. His mother, the woman he's been ready to destroy with accusations and bitter truths, was manipulated just as surely as everyone else in Claudius's web of deception. But she chose him over your memory. Hamlet protests. She chose survival. Denmark corrects. In this business, that's often the only choice people think they have. The ghostly figure begins to fade as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind only the return of normal temperature and lighting. Gertrude remains oblivious to the supernatural visitation, seeing only her son apparently arguing with invisible phantoms. Hamlet, please, she whispers, tears streaming down her cheeks. Let me help you. We can get you the best doctors, the finest treatment. I don't need doctors, mother, he replies, his voice suddenly gentle. I need you to open your eyes and see what Claudius really is before it's too late for all of us. 3 days after the screening room confrontation, Elsinore Studios feels like a pressure cooker about to explode. The morning sun reflects off the glass towers and chrome facades, but beneath the surface glamour, power struggles and deadly secrets threaten to tear apart the entertainment empire that Denmark Elsinore spent 40 years building. In the executive boardroom, Claudius calls an emergency meeting of the studio's most trusted advisors. The polished conference table reflects the faces of men and women who control billions in entertainment revenue, their expressions carefully neutral despite the chaos swirling around them. Hamlet has become unstable, Claudius announces, his voice carrying the authoritative tone that has closed countless deals. His public accusations, his erratic behavior on set, his claims of supernatural visitations, they're damaging the studio's reputation and threatening our upcoming releases. Polonius nods gravely from his position at the table's far end. As head of production, he's watched the young heir's descent into apparent madness with growing concern. The crew on Stage 7 reports increasingly bizarre behavior. Yesterday, he berated the cinematographer for an hour about shadows that weren't there. Through the boardroom's floor-to-ceiling windows, the studio lot spreads out below like a small city devoted to dreams and illusions. Soundstages house elaborate sets for next summer's blockbusters, while editing suites work around the clock to prepare films for spring releases. The machine of entertainment never stops, but its smooth operation now faces an unprecedented threat. I propose we commit him, Claudius continues, sliding a manila folder across the polished table. Discreetly, of course. There's a private facility in Switzerland, exclusive, confidential, specializing in high-profile cases. He can receive the help he needs while we protect the studio's interests. The folder contains psychological evaluations, legal documents, and photographs documenting Hamlet's recent behavior. To anyone reviewing the evidence, the case seems clear. A young man overwhelmed by grief and responsibility, unable to cope with the pressures of inheriting an entertainment empire. But Rosencrantz and Guildenstern exchange uneasy glances. They've known Hamlet since college, and despite his recent erratic behavior, something about Claudius's eagerness to remove him feels wrong. The speed of the proposed solution, the convenience of the Swiss facility, the way all the documents appear to have been prepared in advance. It all suggests a level of premeditation that makes them uncomfortable. What about the board's investigation into his accusations? Guildenstern asks carefully. Several members have requested a formal inquiry into Denmark's death. Claudius's expression hardens almost imperceptibly. The coroner's report was conclusive. Natural causes, stress-related heart failure. Any further investigation would only feed Hamlet's delusions and create unnecessary scandal. Meanwhile, 40 floors below in the studio's basement editing suites, Hamlet reviews security footage from the night his father died. The digital files, recovered from backup servers that Claudius apparently forgot existed, show Denmark's final hours with chilling clarity. The timestamp reads 11:47 p.m. when Denmark enters his private screening room to review dailies from the summer's biggest production. He appears healthy, alert, and completely unaware that he's being watched from the hallway shadows. At 12:23 a.m., a figure enters the screening room tall, wearing expensive clothes, moving with the confidence of someone who belongs in the executive suite. Claudius, Hamlet whispers, his finger tracing the image on the high-resolution monitor. The security camera angle doesn't capture the actual murder, but it records Claudius leaving the screening room at 12:41 a.m. Adjusting his tie and smoothing his hair with the careful attention of someone ensuring he looks perfectly normal. 18 minutes, more than enough time to administer poison, and wait for it to take effect. This is evidence, Hamlet tells Horatio, who stands behind him in the cramped editing suite. Concrete proof that Claudius was in that room when Dad died. It's circumstantial, Horatio warns, though his voice carries hope for the first time in weeks. Any lawyer could argue legitimate business reasons for the visit, but combined with everything else, it's enough to demand a real investigation, Hamlet finishes. Enough to force the truth into the open. But as they prepare to leave the editing suite with their damning evidence, footsteps echo in the basement corridor outside. Heavy boots, moving with military precision security guards, probably armed, definitely loyal to whoever signs their paychecks. Mr. Elsinore? A voice calls through the steel door. Mr. Claudius would like to see you in his office, immediately. Hamlet and Horatio exchange glances. The invitation sounds polite, but the presence of armed guards suggests it's anything but voluntary. Through the editing suite's small window, they can see more security personnel positioning themselves throughout the basement level. The trap is closing, Hamlet murmurs, ejecting the security footage disc and slipping it into his jacket pocket. But I still have one move left to play. The basement corridor feels like a tomb as Hamlet and Horatio emerge from the editing suite, flanked by studio security guards whose black uniforms and mirrored sunglasses give them the appearance of government agents. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on the concrete walls, and the distant hum of the building's mechanical systems provides an ominous soundtrack to their forced march toward the executive elevators. This isn't necessary, Hamlet says as they're escorted into the elevator car. I'll speak with my uncle willingly. Mr. Claudius insists on proper security protocols. The lead guard responds, his hand resting meaningfully on the radio clipped to his belt. Given recent incidents, the elevator rises through 40 floors of Hollywood power, past editing suites where tomorrow's blockbusters take shape, past production offices where multi-million-dollar deals are negotiated over expensive lunches. Each floor represents a different level of the entertainment hierarchy, but all roads lead to the executive suite where Claudius now holds absolute power. But it gets worse. As the elevator doors open on the 40th floor, Hamlet sees that the entire executive level has been transformed into an armed camp. Security guards patrol the hallways, and every office door stands closed, except for Claudius's corner suite, which glows with warm light like a spider's parlor designed to attract unwary prey. Claudius stands behind his massive desk, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows that offer a commanding view of Los Angeles. The city spreads out below like a circuit board of dreams and ambitions, its millions of lights reflecting the scope of power that flows through this building. "Nephew," Claudius says, without turning around, "I understand you've been conducting unauthorized research into matters that should remain buried with the dead." Hamlet's hand instinctively moves toward his jacket pocket, where the security footage disc rests like a weapon waiting to be drawn. "I've been seeking truth in a building full of lies." "Truth?" Claudius finally turns, and his expression has shed all pretense of familial warmth. "Truth is whatever serves the greater good, And right now, the greater good requires your removal from this equation. The reason this is happening becomes crystal clear as Claudius reveals his true nature. Gone is the grieving brother and concerned stepfather, replaced by a calculating predator who has spent months positioning his pieces for this final gambit. You killed him, Hamlet states with absolute certainty. You murdered my father for this empire, and now you're planning to eliminate me the same way. Your father was weak, Claudius replies coldly. Sentimental. He cared more about artistic integrity than market share, more about legacy than profit margins. Under his leadership, we were losing ground to Disney, to Warner Brothers, to every studio willing to embrace the corporate realities of modern entertainment. Through the office windows, the studio lot looks deceptively peaceful in the afternoon sun. Soundstages house elaborate productions, the commissary serves power lunches, and golf carts ferry executives between meetings, where the fate of popular culture is decided. But beneath this veneer of creative collaboration lurks the brutal machinery of corporate ambition. Listen to this. Claudius opens a leather portfolio and slides documents across his desk. Commitment papers. Signed by 2 psychiatrists who will testify to your deteriorating mental state. Within an hour, you'll be on a private jet to Switzerland, where you can spend the rest of your life receiving the finest psychiatric care that money can buy. And if I refuse? Refusal isn't an option, Claudius replies, gesturing toward the security guards who have positioned themselves between Hamlet and the door. Your recent behavior has made you a danger to yourself and others. The studio has a responsibility to ensure public safety. But that's not all. As Hamlet processes the magnitude of his uncle's treachery, another figure appears in the doorway, Ophelia, but transformed beyond recognition. Her usually perfect appearance has deteriorated into something haunting and tragic. Her auburn hair hangs in tangled strands, and her vintage-inspired dress is wrinkled and stained. Most disturbing are her eyes, which hold the glassy emptiness of someone whose mind has retreated from an unbearable reality. Ophelia? Hamlet breathes, momentarily forgetting his own desperate situation. She knows about her father, Claudius says with cruel satisfaction. Polonius discovered your little investigation, tried to warn me about the security footage. Unfortunately, he had an accident on his way home last night. Tragic car crash on Mulholland Drive. Those canyon roads can be so dangerous in the dark. The revelation hits Hamlet like a physical blow. Polonius, whatever his flaws, had been a fixture at the studio for 20 years. His death represents another innocent victim in Claudius's ruthless climb to absolute power. You monster, Hamlet whispers. But Claudius merely smiles with the confidence of someone who has eliminated every obstacle to his ambitions. I'm a survivor, he corrects. In this business, that's the only kind of person who reaches the top and stays there. Ophelia wanders into the office like a sleepwalker, her movements disconnected from reality. She clutches a handful of white roses props from one of the sound stages and begins distributing them to the security guards, with the vacant smile of someone whose mind has snapped under unbearable pressure. For remembrance, she says in a sing-song voice that chills everyone in the room. Daddy always said the camera never lies. But people do. People lie all the time in this town. Get her out of here, Claudius orders. But Ophelia continues her tragic performance, scattering rose petals across the Persian rugs and mahogany furniture. There's rosemary for remembrance, she continues, her voice growing more fragmented, and rue for regret. We may call it herb of grace on Sundays, but grace is such a rare commodity in Hollywood, don't you think? The sight of Ophelia's breakdown gives Hamlet the distraction he needs. While the security guards focus on the disturbed young woman, he slips the security footage disc from his pocket and slides it into the executive conference room's presentation system. You want to discuss my mental state? Hamlet calls out, his voice carrying new authority. Let's review some recent history first. The wall-mounted screens throughout the executive suite flicker to life, displaying the damning security footage from the night Denmark died. Every angle, every timestamp, every incriminating detail plays out with digital clarity that cannot be disputed or dismissed. There's your truth, Uncle, Hamlet announces as the footage shows Claudius entering and leaving Denmark's screening room during the crucial window when the murder occurred. 18 minutes in a room with a man who died of mysterious heart failure. Care to explain what urgent business required a midnight visit? But it gets crazier. Instead of denial or explanation, Claudius begins to laugh, a sound devoid of warmth or humanity. Do you think this changes anything? Evidence can be manufactured, testimony can be purchased, and digital files can be altered by anyone with sufficient technical expertise. The security guards move toward Hamlet, but he's ready for them. Years of film school training have taught him to think in terms of action sequences, and the executive suite becomes his elaborate set piece. He vaults over the conference table, using his knowledge of the building's layout to stay ahead of his pursuers. The truth will come out, Hamlet shouts as he crashes through the office's glass doors into the executive hallway. Every reporter in Los Angeles will see that footage. Not if you're declared mentally incompetent, Claudius replies, following with the confidence of a man who controls every variable. Not if you suffer a tragic accident before reaching any reporters. The chase moves through the executive level like a scene from one of the studio's action films. Hamlet uses his intimate knowledge of the building to navigate through editing suites, production offices, and screening rooms, while Claudius's security force attempts to corner him with military precision. But listen to this. The confrontation reaches its climax in Denmark's preserved office, where everything began. As Hamlet barricades himself behind his father's massive desk, the ghostly presence returns one final time, visible only to his son. The time for subtlety has passed, Denmark's spirit announces, his form more solid and determined than ever before. Justice demands action, not just evidence. I have the proof, Hamlet gasps, exhausted from his flight through the building. The security footage will expose him. Proof means nothing if you're not alive to present it, the ghost replies. Claudius has moved beyond murder to open warfare. You must respond in kind. The office door explodes inward as security guards breach Hamlet's defenses. But in the confusion, Hamlet spots something. His father's ghost is indicating a hidden compartment in the mahogany desk that contains Denmark's personal insurance policy against betrayal. Inside the secret drawer lies a loaded revolver and a manila envelope marked insurance open only in case of murder. The envelope contains financial records proving Claudius's embezzlement, photographs of secret meetings with rival studios, and a detailed confession that Denmark had prepared before his death. He knew, Hamlet breathes. Understanding finally dawning. Dad knew Claudius would try to kill him. As Claudius enters the office, flanked by armed guards, Hamlet raises the revolver with steady hands. The weapon feels surprisingly heavy, its weight representing not just steel and gunpowder, but the burden of justice delayed and family honor destroyed. It's over, Uncle, Hamlet announces, his voice carrying the authority of righteous vengeance. Everything ends here, in the room where you murdered my father. Through the office windows, Los Angeles spreads out in all its artificial glory, a city built on dreams and maintained by lies, where truth is whatever serves the highest bidder. But in this moment, in this room where an empire was born, and where justice has finally arrived, the only currency that matters is blood, and the settling of debts that can never be forgiven.